I'm going to ask you to hang on to your Chumash this morning, whether you're with us here in the sanctuary or you're at home. Open up to page 533, Exodus 32, verse 16. That's where we're going to start. This morning's, or framing rather, the epic events of this morning's Torah reading are two very important objects. The first set of the Aseret Hadibrot, the first set of the Ten Commandments, and the second set of the Ten Commandments. The first set that are given before the incident of the Egel HaZahav, before the incident of the golden calf, and the second set that are given immediately following. There's something very interesting about these two sets of tablets, these two sets of commandments. And they create what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks notes and calls a paradox. First, let's take a look. The first set of the commandments, which are described here in Exodus 32, verse 16, Haluchot Maaseh Elohim Hema, V'hamichtav Elohim hu charut al haluchot. The tablets, the first set of the tablets, were God's work, and the writing was God's writing, incised upon the tablets themselves. Meaning that the first set of the commandments were a direct revelation. God hewed the stones of the tablets themselves and inscribed the commandments onto those tablets. Now, if we turn to page 540, chapter 34, the verse 1, here's how the second set of tablets are described. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, God says to Moses, Pesal lecha shnei luchot avanim karishonim. You should carve two sets of tablets like the first. V'chatavti ala luchot et hadavarim asher hayu ala luchot harishonim asher shibarta. And then I will inscribe upon the commandments the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. So what's the difference between the first set of commandments and the second set of commandments? Someone want to shout it out? Maybe I'll hear you behind the plexiglass and 100 meters away from wherever you are. What's the difference between the first set and the second set? The first set were completely God's doing. The second set, Moshe plays a role. Moshe carves out the tablets themselves. In the second set, there's the revelation isn't completely direct. There's an intermediary in terms of a human actor, that human actor being Moshe. That's the one respect in which the commandments, one important respect in which the commandments are different. There are actually other respects in which they're different as well. We'll save that for another Devar Torah in another year. This set, the second set, are not wholly the work of God. And that, according to Rabbi Sacks, is what creates the paradox. What's the paradox? The first set, which are wholly the work of God, are the set that are destroyed and do not last. The second set, which are not wholly the work of God, but have Moshe, have a human being as an intermediary, are the ones that become eternal, that last forever, that remain intact in the Aron HaKodesh. We would expect the greater holiness to be imbued in the set of tablets that are directly given to us by God, not in the commandment, in the tablets of the commandments that were given to us by Moshe. Why was the more holy object broken and the less holy object, why did that stay intact? That's the question that Rabbi Sacks asks. And there are all sorts of responses that our ancestors, that the commentaries and commentators give to this question. One is, it's a lesson on Jewish spirituality. Itaruta la'ayol, itaruta delatata. That there's an awakening from above. There are awakenings that come from God, and there are awakenings that come from below, from human beings and from our experiences with God. That above, what comes from above is something that can change nature, but not necessarily human nature. When human beings take the initiative, then something changes within them, within us. When we take the initiative of spirituality, when we take the initiative of holiness, we have the ability to transform our lives. And now, they know that they're capable of great things because they did so once, and so they're aware that they can do so again. In other words, the second tablets are eternal precisely because they are a partnership between human beings and God. After the golden calf, after the Egel HaZahav, it's as if God learns that God needs us. That God, like a parent, like any parent, can provide direction, can give us an understanding of what's right and what's wrong, can give us sacred law, ability, and guidance. But if the mitzvot are to be alive, then the mitzvot must ultimately live within our deeds and what we do, and we have to be willing to do it, to be a part of it. God needs us. This is the opposite, by the way, of Plato. In Plato, the Platonic realm is a realm of pure ideas and ideals. They don't exist in our realm. Rather, the most that we can expect in the Platonic world is to be able to glimpse at the shadow of that holiness. The shadow of that holiness. Judaism understands the world differently. In fact, Abraham Joshua Heschel, Rabbi Heschel, makes this point specific in his book, God in Search of Man. Pure ideas and ideals are nice to contemplate, but they don't actually exist in the real world of human interaction. God needs humanity to carry these ideals out into the world. Without a human partner, God doesn't have a real place in the world, and God's ideas can't exist either. Heschel says it this way: it is in events, not only ideas, that ultimate reality comes to expression. The substance of Judaism is given in both history, events, and in thought, in ideals. So how does God need us? Well, when we look at so many of our commandments and rituals, we see what some have called a predicate theology. Judaism is a predicate theology. We talk about somech noflim, kabed et avicha v'et amecha, that you should honor your father and your mother. We talk about mikadesh ha-Shabbat. Shabbat is a verb. The seventh day, Saturday, is ordinary until we mikadesh ha-Shabbat, until we do something, take some action that sets it apart, makes it holy, makes it sacred. There's a beautiful Hasidic story about hunger and bread that Heschel's grandfather told about Jewish atheists. The story is that a Hasidic Rebbe once said to his students, "We can learn something from every spiritual path." His students responded, "Rebbe, what can we possibly learn from atheists? from non-believers? The Rebbe answered, we can learn a lot from atheists. For example, when you see your brother or sister hungry, never say that God will provide. Rather say, perhaps there is no God, and I need to provide. Another example is from Kafka. Kafka, who is most well known for his books, The Trial and the Metamorphosis, who characterized anxiety and alienation and characters who faced absurd situations in order to express those anxieties and alienations. There's a story that's told about Kafka that comes from Jack Wertheimer's book, The Uses of Tradition. In the last time that Kafka visited Berlin, he chanced upon a little girl in the park, and she was awash with tears. When he asked about the reason why she was crying, she sobbed that she had lost her doll. Compassionately, Kafka countered that was not the case. Her doll, he said to her, simply went on a trip. And in fact, he met her on her way out. And he promised the little girl that if she would return to the park the next day, he would bring her a letter from her doll. And so Kafka did this for several weeks. For several weeks, he would arrive each morning at the park with a letter for his new friend from her doll. As his tuberculosis worsened, Kafka decided to return to Prague, where he would soon die at the age of 41, but not before buying the girl another doll. Along with the doll came a letter in which Kafka insisted that this was the doll that belonged to his friend. Admittedly, he said, she looked different. But then on her long trip, the doll had seen many remarkable sights and gone through many searing experiences. And life changed her appearance. Life changed her appearance. What an incredible story of chesed and of the transformational elements of mitzvot, of not relying on God to intervene in the world, but on understanding that we, human beings, bring God into the world through the acts of kindness, the mitzvot that we perform, especially in relationship to other human beings. Whether it's providing bread when people are hungry as if no God exists, or taking the time to help a little girl in her distress over her doll. And it's not really the doll that gets transformed by that life experience. It's Kafka. It's the little girl. It's we who might be inspired by such stories to take it upon ourselves as we read in Aleinu at the end of the service, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to be God's active partners in completing the work of creation, of completing this world as God intended it to be. God can provide us with the Aseret HaDibrot that we display so prominently on our Aron HaKodesh and which we study. But unless we make the efforts to carve the tablets and to inscribe its words within our hearts and into our deeds, it's just a symbol. What does it mean? Little. So Judaism is a predicate theology. God is a verb. Judaism is a verb. And that helps us to understand why the second tablets last. Why it's only the second set of tablets that are eternal. Human initiative changes us. That's what God figured out. That in the relationship prior, God does everything. God brings the plagues, splits the sea, causes manna to fall from heaven. And yet, with all those miracles, Bnei Yisrael still turn to an Egel HaZahav. To put it in the colloquial, because they had no skin in the game. And so here, after the Egel HaZahav, part of the transformation of the relationship of the covenant between God and humanity is that God realizes that we have to be active partners. And so Moses hews the tablets. And those tablets are what become eternal. We are ultimately responsible for our souls, for our actions that respond to God's search for us. Shabbat Shalom.